I want to talk about the latest poll numbers as well as maybe some of the strategy that we are seeing from both Harris and Donald Trump as we get into the middle of August as well. So let's bring in our next guest here of this hour, Brian Sobel, political analyst. Thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. And Brian, first off, I got to ask you about that battleground states. It's all going to come down to those states. And right now it seems like it's all even.
Mike, I think you're reporting exactly what guys like me predicted, which is that switching out Joe Biden with somebody else, in this case Kamala Harris, and the bump you get from the excitement of who is going to be the vice presidential pick by the candidate for president, and moving into the Democrat convention here, all of that is a bounce for the Democrat contender for the White House. Totally expected. What is going to be interesting is what the polls are saying after the Democrat convention, and maybe a week to 10 days after that, when the kind of the high of the excitement that comes from all of what's going on the Democrat side of the aisle kind of comes back to earth, and now people start focusing on the issues in this campaign.
Yeah, that's so true. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the strategy that we saw yesterday in part from Donald Trump. Really, Trump campaign talking right now that Harris not giving any interviews, hardly talking to the media, trying to ramp up that pressure. And we saw him yesterday go over an hour in this news conference type of setting. How much more pressure can he put, or Trump's team put on Harris to do more of these speaking engagements with the media?
Well, sadly speaking, it's not going to be Donald Trump that's going to force her to speak to the media. It's going to be the media rising up and saying, "Hey, how come it's coming close to 3 weeks and you haven't met with us in an open setting?" And so when the media starts ramping that up and saying enough is enough, we want to hear from you in a candid environment where you don't know what the questions are going to be and you're not reading off a teleprompter, then she'll be forced to do that. And in tandem with that, when enough people, even on the Democrat side of the aisle, say enough is enough, start talking, that's the pressure. As for the pressure coming from J.D. Vance and from Donald Trump, it maybe puts a little pressure on, but that's not where the real pressure point is.
And who do you think is the guard there, where it seems like even with Joe Biden, when he was still running, it felt like there was always a guard for him not to be speaking too much. And when he did call on reporters, he had a list there. And with Harris, it seems like they're almost playing with the same playbook there. So who's really saying, okay,
yep,
we don't need to do a lot of these engagements right now?
I think they set a pattern during the Joe Biden presidency that if you just kind of gave the media a gentle Heisman, as it were, that the media wouldn't bark about it, wouldn't bite, wouldn't say, "Hey, we demand better access," and they got away with it for a really long time. And I think most of us who watched Joe Biden very carefully and maybe knew him in the past knew that this wasn't the Joe Biden that people met or knew in the past. He isn't sadly the Joe Biden that I met numerous times when he was in the United States Senate. Different guy, and I think his staff really closed ranks and said, "Hey, the more we expose him, the more problems we have." And then, of course, the campaign ensued, and it became very, very clear that the president has some serious cognitive issues. But the playbook worked. That's the thing, because the media didn't demand anything. And so Kamala Harris, who I think will fall into some of the same traps that her boss did, that is not speaking well off the cuff, and we've watched her speech patterns for quite some time. I think they're holding her out as long as they can from the media so that she doesn't step on a nail and say something that really derails her campaign.
Sure. And well, we know that we have one debate in the books. We're talking the September 10th one on ABC. So we know that one is a go from both campaigns there. And how do you think Donald Trump's approach will be on this one? Because do you think it'll be more of what we saw with him and Hillary back in 2016, where he had to navigate going up against a woman as well?
He'd be smart to think about it. They a good speech or a debate rather presenter consultant is going to provide some traps for his candidate, in this case Kamala Harris, to set in a debate to see whether Donald Trump will walk into them, and that's around reproductive rights, women's issues, issues of color, all of those things. She will bait him in the debate. And then Donald Trump has to be smart enough to not take the bait. And so hopefully Donald Trump will listen to his speech experts, his debate experts, and be really prepared. I think the real fear among Republicans, however, Mike, is that Donald Trump doesn't take advice very well. He has sort of a natural instinct, he believes, for doing what he thinks is in his own best interest. But you know what? That doesn't work all the time.
No, no, and it'll be interesting to see because I think a lot of Americans, when they look at a debate, they don't want to hear the name calling or the different types of. They want to hear about the policies and how you would be effective rather than the other person. I think once you start doing the name calling, the whole message gets lost.
Absolutely, Mike. And I think that uh, kind of demeanor really does some progressive damage. It may not do much the first time you hear it or the second time, but when it becomes this sustained pattern, you start wondering about somebody and saying, "Hey, the name calling is not the way to go here." And you recall during the Obama presidency, I think it may have been attributed to Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. That was kind of trite in some ways, but there's some truth to it. People don't want to hear negativity all the time. They want to hear somebody say, "Hey, here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's what I think my opponent cannot do for you." Because they don't know enough about it or this isn't their focus, but not that they're short, that they've got this, they've got that. It just doesn't play well. And I guess if I were ever an advisor to the Trump campaign, I would say to them, "Hey, knock that stuff off." But the problem is their candidate doesn't want to knock it off. And I, by the way, have equal advice for the Democrat if they brought me on.
Yeah, so true. So true. And lastly, I just want to get your insight about, you hear about the Harris honeymoon phase that she is in right now. When does that end? I mean, I know you got the DNC as well, and she'll get a bump there as well. But when does that then come back, into reality mode a little bit more?
It's going to come back to Earth about 7 or 10 days after the convention. And this is fairly typical. The poll numbers after a convention really jump 3 or 4 points, often 5. Now, the caveat here is that most of America has made up their mind already about this race. But for those that still haven't made up their mind, they may swing to Harris because they're independents, because the convention's really exciting, and there's a lot of applause and excitement around Harris herself and her vice presidential pick. But after the convention and a few days go by, then it all comes back down to earth. And now it gets focused again on, hey, really, who is the best person to lead us forward? So, in answer to your question, 7 to 10 days if I had to pick a number.
There we go. Brian Sobel, thanks so much for joining us on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate it here, Friday edition. And yeah, it's just going to heat up from here on out.
Absolutely, Mike. Pleasure gabbing with you.
Yes, always, always. You take care. Have a great weekend.